Dr. Robert Berry, University of Arizona, distinguished Dean, distinguished professor of mathematics. Thank you so much for joining the National Newspaper Publishers Association as we explore the importance of mathematics for all students, but particularly for African American students, K through 12 and beyond. Tell us how you first got attracted to mathematics, Dr. Berry.
Wow, well, I appreciate that. Yeah, I would say probably in my elementary years, I had a sixth grade teacher who saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, and pushed me in significant ways, really around mathematics and around engineering and things of that nature. In her class, I created a project where I made a fan, and she just let me tinker. She had this space in the back of her classroom where we tinkered. And so probably that was the first person when I was in elementary grades where I had a teacher who just let me kind of tinker, play around, discover, and do that kind of work. And I would say as I moved on through, I guess then junior high school to high school, then to college, I had significant teachers and instructors in my life who were
Well, that's a good segue because we are working with the Bill and Gates Foundation to try to find ways and means to raise public awareness, particularly for African American families and young people in school of the importance of math. There's a myth out there that people can just slide through school without focusing on math. From your perspective, as a college professor and a dean, tell us how important you think subject matter math is to not only the large from your perspective.
I didn't catch the entire question. You froze up on a little bit.
I was asking how important is mathematics? STEM field, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. But to me, the mathematics seems to be the language of all the fields of science. Can you just tell us how important math is to the present day, but also to the future?
Yeah, absolutely. So mathematics provides the opportunity for students to make decisions, right? We use math. We use, not only mathematics, but statistics and other mathematical reasoning to make decisions that are important in our lives. And so when we think about the importance of mathematics, we think about the mathematics that underlying a lot of engineering projects. And sometimes the math does compute, sometimes it doesn't compute. And based on the mathematics, we make a decision. If you think about it in our everyday life, we make decisions based on mathematical reasoning, whether we make a purchase, whether we make a decision to, how we might spend our money and things of that nature. All of those things math help us make decisions. Math is kind of information that allow us to decide how we might engage in something or how we might not engage in another thing as well. So for me, it's significantly important that we provide the mathematical foundation for students because it empowers them to be able to make decisions about their lives. And those processes that underlie mathematics and the concept that support them are significantly for building efficacious learners, people who feel confident about what they want to do, and to make decisions about how informed decisions, not inform. Mathematics allows us to have informed decisions about things that we engage in our lives.
Thank you. Specifically K through 12, how early, from your perspective, should people start letting young people learn something about mathematics?
It starts in pre-K. I would say, as you think about the things that we do so that are socialized. So for example, think about a young child, even in their home, where they may have to get enough, let's say, forks for everybody for dinner. That from a mathematical perspective, that is a one-to-one correspondence activity. They may not even, if there are 5 people in their family, they may not even be able to count to 5, but they might be able to get 5 forks because they know there's one for mom, dad, brother, sister, and me, something of that sort. or so the idea of just having kids to socialize around mathematics very early, even before they are counters, they can do mathematical reasoning very soon. Now we can transition that to counting and then computing and things of that nature. But how, so get enough cups for everyone. Just think, passing out papers in schools builds that one-to-one correspondence that kids need from a computational point of view, but then it translates to all the other things that we need to do. And so, it's amazing. Some kids can recognize in quantities, but not be able to count. Some kids can recognize there's 3 items, but not count the 3 because they've done these things like gotten enough forks or gotten enough spoons or gotten enough cups. Those are significant foundational experiences that we can begin to support students from a socialization point. We socialize them around mathematics, which then provide the foundation for mathematical reasoning moving forward. So I argue pre-K.
Very good, very good. In terms of African Americans and other communities of color in the United States, I know you in Arizona, a very diverse state. How have you seen it's definitively moving in the right direction? Are we getting more comprehension, more embrace of math in terms of communities of color? Or do you still think it's somewhat of a challenge?
I would say one of the challenges that we have is finding qualified people to support, particularly, students in our communities. And how do we find those qualified people? So, you might have heard of the term being culturally relevant, and understanding the communities from which children come from and making the mathematics culturally relevant for them is significantly important. And so, yes, I'm in Arizona, where there's a lot of diversity and rich culture here. But how then we embed the cultural resources from the communities in which students come from to support their mathematical thinking?
In terms of mathematics also being a pathway on to college, there's debate about should young people get into pre-calculus geometry while they're still in junior high school? Should they wait to high school? What is the progression of math comprehension so that one can go on to college and get a graduate education or postgraduate?
Wow. I mean, those are big conversations, and they're significant conversations. I think we're going to have a conversation about the role of calculus and the role of statistics. We know that statistical reasoning and I would argue data, big data, right? All of those things overlap in significant ways, but all of those provide incredible opportunities. I don't think it's an either or situation. It is, when I said earlier that this math allows us to make decisions, how does a person see themselves in the future? So how do the kids see themselves in the future, and what mathematical pipeline will they take? Is if they see themselves aligned around statistical reasoning, I think we have to create pipelines in K-12 where students can prepare around statistical reasoning. If they see themselves around handling and working with big data and engaging around situations that require big data, there has to be a pathway for that. Right now, we have a pathway that focuses primarily on calculus. And I want to argue that we might have to broaden that pathway. We have to bring in statistical reasoning. We have to bring in big data, and they're not mutually exclusive. They significantly overlap. And so for some students, they get turned away because the pathway may not be the thing that is important for them as they see for their future. And so how do we broaden that pathway that creates opportunities beyond the calculus pipeline?
That's a very good, you said a mouthful. I just want to drill down. There's an intersection between technology and math. And I know you've written about this subject matter. Broadly speaking, for our audience, how would you say there should be a broader understanding of how technology, the use of math in technology? I recently interviewed Robert Smith, the first a black billionaire, and he was saying how important it is for young people to learn how to code, learn how to handle data, learn how to do stuff. In some ways, as you say, socialize the education so that people get a grasp of the intersection of technology.
Yeah. So I mean, just think about this with students and think people more broadly. Technology has a significant impact on our lives, and we engage in technology in significant ways. Even for students who are gamers or people who are gamers, imagine the amount of mathematics and decision making that they make in that. And so, yes, we're going to have to figure out how we can get students exposed more broadly to coding. We got to get students more exposed more broadly to statistical reasoning. I mean, and I would argue, you know, those who are gamers, there's a lot of geometry that's embedded in that, but we don't make it overtly apparent to students that they're engaging in geometrical reasoning. They're engaging in statistical reasoning. They're engaging in coding in itself is interesting kind of underlying algebra that's there. And so how do we begin to connect these classes or these things that students do in school with coding and algebra, geometry and gaming, you know, all of this data that's around us, we can connect it to our current curriculum that makes it relevant for students so that they can, you know, be well informed to make the kinds of decisions they want to make for themselves and the families will want to make for themselves. So I think one of the things that we have to do is building the expertise in our mathematical pipeline so that we can have people to see the connection between coding and algebra, geometry, and the gaming aspect of that, and data that happens. And whether I'm using gaming as an example, but you know, the technology that underlies all of that. And if you watch young children as they engage in technology, somehow they have this sense of curiosity around it. You know, they have their I'm gonna use the term efficacious, meaning that they're not afraid to make a mistake because they learn from their mistake and they try again. They learn from their mistake and try again. How do we build that in mathematics teaching and learning? It's not a mistake, is something that we learn from. It's not something that we should be shameful about. And so mistakes are points of growing. And students use technology in that way. That's how they figure out how to play games without reading direction. That's how they figure out a lot of technology without reading the direction. And so how do we embed that in our teaching where students can engage in tinkering, engage in the technology, allow them to make mistakes and say, okay, what did you learn from the mistake? What would you do differently? And that's all, and that can be embedded in mathematics at the intersection of technology.
Well, that's a very interesting and timely intersection that you're making reference. As a teacher, teaching institutions, you know, and education, they're aware of the need for cultural sensitivity around these questions because a lot of young people in urban areas, as you say, they game before they go to school, or they use technology, they use gadgets. We live in a gadget society. So
Right.
how can we connect these gadgets to the educational process?
Right. And that is one of the challenges, right? Because we have some school spaces that will prohibit the use of these gadgets, right?
That's
And we
right.
have,
Some schools don't even allow students to bring a cell phone to school.
right. And which could be an incredible technology resource for learning, right? If we can train people to use it such a way. So we have some schools that prohibit this and some schools that allow it, and we have everything in between, right? And so it is, what is the conversation that we're gonna have nationally on how we embed technology because in a culturally enriching, sensitive way. We can, for example, I would say this, if I can use an example, you know, many of us take pictures with our phone, right? And many of us take a bunch of pictures with our phone and we make decisions about which picture is the one that we want to put on Instagram, so to speak, right? But there's something embedded in that. What are decisions? How does one make a decision about which one's the best, which one is not the best? And that's the same thing that we begin to use technology in that way. You know, we can begin to use the games, the apps, all of those resources that are available to us. If we prohibit cell phones, then we can, what are the computer resources that we can have? I just think we're going to have to, one, work on our teaching force to be able to be aware, develop awareness. The other is I think we have to work with parents and caregivers, those who are taking care of our children in our communities, to make sure that they are aware that, you know, this device is just not a singular device. This device can have multiple purposes if we can begin to think about how we can use it in an educational way to support our students as learners. And I think that is significantly important. You know, so I don't want to lay it only in the hands of teachers and schools, but I think that it's in the hand of communities, caregivers, parents, as we begin to think about these resources that are available for students, to particularly mathematical resources.
So
You're freezing up on me.
for parents, are there any, I'm sorry, Dr. Barrett, are there any online resources you would recommend to the audience where they could go get some tutorials in math, or particularly for parents? Because as you know, the students learn, the parents also learn at home. Greater math competency. I know some parents have told me because their children will do well in math, that helps the family do well in math. It becomes relevant to the whole family. Can you point us to any resources that may be available to parents or to caregivers, to people who have some, not just supervision, but some impact, mentorship for young people in math?
Absolutely. So one I guess resource I would point you to is if you go to the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, they have some incredible resources on their website, not only for parents, also, although it's NCTM, but they also have kind of a parent resources for parents to kind of access. There are you know, resources for how families can help their children. There's family math resources there for NCTM as well. In the same way, NACCE and NACCE is the early childhood organization that have resources for early childhood as well. I will also point to a resource that I use quite frequently when I work with older kids, because you know, you may know that in high school, kids have graphing calculators, right? And sometimes graphing calculators cost a lot of money. But there's an online resource that's free, and it's called Desmos. Desmos not only have a free graphing calculator that we can use online, but you can download the app and have it on your phone. That way you're not paying the $100, $120 for a graphing calculator. You can get a free graphing calculator and do those kinds of things. They also have activities for families and students and teachers as well that to engage in that as well. And so those are three resources that come to my mind immediately that families and students, and I would argue teachers as well, can access.
Yeah. Very good, very good. We're almost out of time. I always like to ask this question at the end. From your perspective, Dr. Barrett, what gives you your greatest hope for not only communities of color, but for all communities in the United States, how we can get greater, not only comprehension, but understand the importance of math to help shape a better future and improve the quality of life?
Yeah, so my greatest hope is I want students to use math to read and write the world. And that comes from, you know, many of the readings I've done and what I've written about. When I say read and write the world, you know, math is that tool that helps us make decisions, as I stated earlier, but we can use math to read and understand our communities. I often ask my students to mathematize their community. You know, go in and write their community with mathematics, asking questions. I always want us to be curious with mathematics, asking questions. And so for me, my greatest hope is that we begin to use mathematics to read and write the world, to make decisions about what we want to do, and how we want to engage with one another. And math can be that incredible tool that allows us to do that.
Very good. Dr. Robert Berry III at the University of Arizona, thank you so much for joining the Black Press of America. And we want to stay in touch with you because we're working on some app development, we're working on a platform, because I think globally speaking, there's a lot of opportunities to utilize math in the ways that you've outlined. So thank you for joining us today.
I appreciate you having me, and thank you so much. And I look forward to engaging with you in the future as well. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.